Okay, guys. So yeah, thanks for joining. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves and just saying sort of where you're from, what you guys are up to, why you're doing it, I think that'll kick us off.
Yeah, you want to go first? I'll dive in, yeah. So my name is Ronan. I'm a cask sales manager here at Dekantā, managing our distillery cask programs. In the company for coming up on 2 years now. I've learned an incredible amount about Japanese whiskey in that time. Obviously, plenty more to enjoy and to indulge and to learn. It's a really fantastic market. It's a really fantastic role. And I get to spend my days, chatting about whiskey with people who love whiskey, which is a pretty good way to make a living. Based in Barcelona, from Dublin originally. Been living here for almost 10 years. This is home now. I'm just lucky to get to work with a really great team here.
Yeah, I'm Sam. I'm the sales director here at Dekantā. I'm from Dublin as well, so you might recognize the two Dublin accents here. I've been at Dekantā since early 2003. Been in the whiskey market for 7 or 8 years now. I'm half Irish, half Scottish, and I have ancestors rolling in the grave as I only work with Japanese whiskey now. But yeah, really excited about this collaboration with us.
But that's a good segue. So, like, why Japanese whiskey? Scotch would be much easier. Irish whiskey would be much easier based on where you are. Why have you chosen Japanese?
Yeah, good question. I mean, a little bit of serendipity in it all, but some intention as well. So I worked in the Scotch cask market for a number of years, and it was wonderful. I love Scotch whiskey, I love Irish whiskey, but the cask market in Scotland has some challenges. Often you're dealing with kind of third-party warehouses. There's a lot of stock, there's a lot of competition when it comes to exiting. In Japan, it's very different, and I think the kind of 2 key points of difference is, one, the production levels are a fraction of what they are elsewhere. The distilleries we work with fill about a cask a day, and thereabouts. Distilleries in Scotland might fill tens of thousands of casks a year. So that makes a difference in terms of my kind of bespoke service to clients. It also means it's less crowded at the point of exit, and then the ownership structure in Japan is entirely different. It's kind of vertically aligned market, which means essentially the distilleries don't share their whiskey with each other. All their blends are in-house. Maybe the world of blends suffers for variety a little bit, but from a cask owner's perspective, your cask is at the distillery. It's under their care. You can visit it when you do. It's not, a tour alongside a group of strangers. It's the master distiller opening a door, walking you around and pouring a dram from your own cask. And all of that resonated with me, as well as a kind of long-standing fascination with Japan and its culture. Fortunately, I've been able to spend a fair bit of time over there since.
So there's no contact distillation in Japan. Is that a legal thing, or is it a cultural thing, or just what's the reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, historically, I think it's probably cultural, a little bit of competition, and then a trend of building in-house varieties. So Nikka and Suntory, the 2 big whiskey houses in Japan, their blends are their own recipes, and they do it all under the one roof. While in Scotland, you'll have casks often leave the distillery of provenance after they're filled. Maybe there's not enough room in the warehouse on Islay, and it goes off to a kind of third-party warehouse in Scotland, and casks move more freely, and blended whiskey was, I suppose, the drink of the day until relatively recently. What this means, of course, is that in Japan, very rarely, there are some kind of third-party warehouses and independent bottlers more recently, but generally the casks don't leave their birthplace until they're bottled. And they're bottled on site as well.
Okay. So from an investor point of view, what are some of the sort of pros and cons of Japanese versus Scotch or Irish or bourbon or anything else?
I suppose the ownership structure that Sam mentioned is a big deal. To be able to have that reassurance, as you mentioned, the cask is real, it exists, there are people behind it, that direct full legal ownership in Japan is a massive strength and something that is very important to us when we're speaking with clients. We often use Scotland as a comparison where, you might have a third-party warehouse, you might not have, full legal ownership or paperwork, and we've seen in the past that it can be a little bit murky in the Scotch world, whereas in Japanese and in Japanese whiskey, rather, it's direct, it's tangible. As Sam mentioned, you visit the distillery and the master distiller will walk you, through the warehouse, and you can see your cask, you can touch it, you can draw a sample then and there, which makes it, a tangible asset for investors. And in our experience, that adds a lot of reassurance and trust in the asset itself.
Yeah, and then just add some balance. I mean, when we love Scotch and Irish whiskey, we love the market. We don't want to say like
we don't want to talk it down.
But you did ask about cons as well, and I mean, it's obvious casks in Japan are more expensive than casks in Scotland, so the entry level is higher. Now, there's lots of reasons for that, primarily the lower production and the price, kind of retail price of the bottles further down the line. So it all feeds into a value chain, but it's definitely a factor. And then, of course, Japan's that little bit further away for many clients.
Yeah, a bit further away. How are you seeing production numbers trending? Are they ramping up quite a bit?
No, I mean, outside the big whiskey houses, I think Suntory might do 6 million litres per year and be the biggest producer on the islands. I mean, even to put that in context, the likes of Macallan or Glenlivet might do 16 to 20, 21 million litres per year. But outside that, what we're seeing now in this kind of boom of new distilleries in Japan is very much a craft approach. In many cases, it's not just this is our capacity, it's an explicit decision to only produce 400 casks per year, keep 80% of them, sell 20% to private cask owners. And I think it just fits in partly with their capacity, their finances, but also it's that very Japanese kind of craftsmanship philosophy of make something really excellent. Don't cut any corners, don't compromise on anything. And if that means you make less of it, so be it. And that's certainly true of the casks in this vertical we're talking about.
Okay, well, that makes it's very much a artisanal craft product. It sounds like even the bigger spaces.
Mm-hmm.
What so you must feel that the return potential is better for Japanese whiskey versus other options. What drives that? Is it purely the maturation process? Is it the region becoming more popular? Like what's driving it, and how much do you think?
Yeah, there's a couple of factors to play into it. I think, again, to sort of reiterate the point that Sam made, there's very little of this whiskey actually produced. So straight off the bat, you're looking at something that is quite scarce. Naturally, scarcity is going to drive up demand. We can see that, across the distillery partners that we work with, a bottle release can be sold out within a week. And if you're not one of the lucky ones to get your hands on that, well, you're out of luck. You're watching from the outside. As Sam mentioned, sort of the attention to detail and the insistence on quality above all else is a huge factor. So, again, it maybe is a cliche, but that Japanese approach of perfection in all areas is certainly something that we see with our partners. So wood quality is incredibly important. We can see that with the Onsake ex-Solera casks. These are heirlooms. Nobody else in the world is using wood of this quality. Water source is a huge thing. Each distillery, very importantly, has their natural spring coming down from Mount Asano or Mount Ontake, whatever it may be. And then, I think to look a little bit further down the line, the expected value of these bottles when they do go to market. As we said, the sort of average price of Japanese whiskey is that bit higher than Scotch, for example. For those reasons, scarcity, quality, and it's often, as you said, like artisanal, a craft approach where each bottle and each cask is very much something special in its own right.
Yeah, and sometimes that can raise an eyebrow or two. You see a 3-year-old single malt, and it has a price point of $300 per bottle or $400. You actually passed me the Ontake. So this is Ontake's first release in the box here. This is a 3.5-year-old single malt. This was their inaugural release. It's from the same Excelera casks that are in the vertical here with us. That's at 3.5 years of age. It retails between $300 and $400 internationally. So the value argument is very much based on the retail prices of the bottles currently in market. And sometimes, you know, people look at a 3-year-old for $300 and think it's a bit punchy. But then you explain about the production, the craftsmanship, the wood, and everything that goes into it, and they sell extremely well.
Yeah, that makes sense. How much they are all, well, many of these are quite new bottles and distilleries. So how much transaction data have we got to support our valuations on these guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so of the 4 distilleries, they're all relatively new distilleries. In fact, some of the casks in the vertical are from the first vintage years of these distilleries. So you have a 2023 Karizawa from the first year of its rebirth, a 2021 Hanyu from the first year of its rebirth, and then the first casks laid down by Kyokawa in 2022. Naturally, as they're new distilleries, there's not a whole amount of kind of cask sales and resale data out there, which is why we really benchmark against the retail prices of the bottles that are out there. So generally speaking, what we're seeing is 3-year-old single malts from these 3 distilleries retailing about $300 per bottle, thereabouts. Karizawa is an exception because in their revival, they've made this quite unique, quite radical commitment not to bottle anything for 10 years, in which case we're using the projected bottle price that the distillery themselves have given us of between $1,000 and $1,500 per bottle. So unlike perhaps other cask markets where you look at historic secondary cask transactions where there isn't always a lot of price agreements, we're looking at the recommended retail price of these bottles are actually selling at and using that as the data point when our clients want to learn about value.
That makes sense. So this is maybe a good time to talk through the sort of like mechanics of the economics. How does it go from we put a lot of money in these casks to the funds come back to us? What are the steps in there and how's that work?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Obviously, there's time. That's part of it. One of the things and the feedback that we've gotten so far from the community is that the staggered exits and that liquidity is really powerful sort of motivator. Essentially, whiskey as it matures, it increases in value. We know that. So often when we speak with clients, we'll look at a cask price in the sense of bottle price on entry. So let's take Kyokawa, for example, $64 per bottle on entry, give or take. After 3 years, we know that those bottles are retailing for $320. So the numbers add up straight away. And then Dekantā, our role in a partnership like this will be sort of all-encompassing in a sense when it comes to the whiskey side of things. We're, obviously we sell whiskey casks, we manage these distillery programs, but we're also an independent bottler. We won Independent Bottler of the Year in 2022. We've put out, 2 or 3 of our own releases per year, so we're familiar with the sort of bottling logistics. We're also the largest e-commerce platform in the world for Japanese whiskey. Got a database of about 400,000 clients, mailing lists that go out. We offer, the sort of logistics and the support around the actual physical bottling and labeling. We have an in-house design team that can help with bespoke label design for our clients. And from there, we have the ability to actually retail on your behalf. So we have a facility in Tokyo. Bottles will be stored there, shipped directly from there, either through the website or to those retail clients. We take care of the shipping. We take care of any duty that goes on those bottles. I think in the breakdown, Wyatt, that we gave you, we actually looked at the net take home, taking out, maybe the minimal cost of bottling for some of the casks, transport to Tokyo, nominal fee, but worth putting it in there for you and for the clients to have that transparency of, X amount in, Y amount out. There's nothing hidden, there's nothing extra. It's all sort of inclusive. And that's the model that we're sort of going for with this vertical.
Yeah. You passed me the anniversary bottle there?
Yeah.
I'll give you some examples. So this was our 10th year anniversary bottling for our 10th year in operations last year. So this is whiskey we sourced from Saburumaru distillery, a cask we matured ourselves. Our in-house bottling labeling team designs the label. We then have a marketing push, early access. We put it up on the website, sell the bottles. I think there's 195 bottles in that release. I think 160 sold in the first weekend. We're just doing the same with Kyokawa. Put this in the odds community. Their inaugural release is now up for sale. We're at the launch event in Nagano next week, which I can't wait for. And we've been involved in the decisions around the label, decision around the marketing campaign, and now we're selling that, and the pickup rate's been really, really great as well, great response. So it's what we do. In fact, it's what we did long before the cask program. But it's really cool that we're doing this with a group of casks from 4 different distilleries, different wood types, different ages, different regions, different liquid, with these different exits put in. So we're pretty excited to be bottling all this whiskey.
Yeah, for sure. Can you tell us a bit about the different distilleries and what makes each one unique, special, and most importantly, a good investment case?
Sure. Should I take that one?
Yeah, go for it.
So I guess you could kind of see the 4 distilleries. So they're Karizawa, Hanyu, Ontake, and Kyokawa. You could kind of group them in 3 categories. So Karizawa and Hanyu are 2 revived legends. So these are distilleries which shut down in the year 2000, right before Japanese whiskey took off. Remarkably, it was kind of looked down upon until then, and a couple kind of economic conditions coalesced, and they had to shut doors in 2000. And then in the case of Karizawa, they took their first gold medal the very next year. I think 2003 is often considered this kind of watershed moment for Japanese whiskey. And the last 20 years has been a bit of a craze about Japanese whiskey. What happened to those 2 distilleries is they're ghost distilleries now. They're no longer producing, but their liquid is revered. And what happens with ghost distilleries is prices typically get a little bit hysterical. So this happens with Karizawa. Hanyu has happened in Scotland with Aurora and Port Ellen. Individual bottles of Karizawa selling for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 on auction floors. Kind of mad stuff. They've now both been revived. And as with any revivals, there's points of difference and points of continuity, but they're both genuine revivals with same name, returning distillers, replica stills, same recipes, and then their own unique points of difference as well. So I think the 2 revived distilleries represent an opportunity to buy into a lot of brand equity, a lot of lore, a lot of legends. And they're those 2. And then the other 2 are a bit different. Ontake is actively releasing whiskey. They've just actually today or yesterday put out their 4th release, a Mizunara release. Their 3 releases previously have swept the awards, not any old awards, the IWSC, the San Francisco Spirits Awards. This is the Emmys, the Oscars, the Ballon d'Or of whiskey. They're an amazing distillery with a company Nishishutsu behind them that have been making shoshu and sake in the region since the 1840s. It's about 180 years. They own a winery in New Zealand as well. This is a distillery with their own golf course as a garden, and onsen they've dug for. It's just luxury in every direction, and that includes the casks that they choose, these Excelera casks with 40 to 50 years maturation behind them. So they're active, award-winning, and a couple of years further down the line than the 4th distillery, which is Kyokawa. We've been working with them since 2022. We've just launched their first inaugural release, so it's an amazing moment for Kyokawa. They're Japan's only fully farm-to-bottle terroir-driven distillery. What that means is they grow all their own barley locally. And some distilleries have grown barley locally or use local barley for limited batches. Shizuoka comes to mind. But Kyokawa have, in a very dogged, determined way, crossbred 3 strains of barley to survive in the Yama Mountains, the Japanese Alps, essentially, where only rice is grown before. Have these kind of seasonal golden harvests, which is a bit of a miracle. And they use all of that for the whiskey. So that's a real point of difference. The whiskey's amazing. The casks they use are really rich, Marsala, Oloroso. They're doing some really cool cask experiments as well, with marmalade seasons and snow matured casks. So there's so much cool stuff going on. But to summarize, you have two revived legends with a huge amount of brand equity. You have Ontake, one of the most exciting, actively releasing award-winning distilleries in Japan, with all of the luxury perks. And then you have Kyokawa, a bit earlier in their journey, but a unique distillery in the Japanese whiskey landscape.
Okay, and you're heading out to see all these guys this week, next week?
Thursday morning.
Exciting times.
Other than necking liters of whiskey, what's the intent of the trip out there? What are you guys going to be doing?
Well, what we do with our partners is, at the core, we run their cask programs on their behalf and manage the clients so that they can focus on the whiskey. But the relationship's a bit more layered than that. So we help them with their brand building, with their marketing, some general consultancy. So typically we have meetings, we check up on our own inventory, we get updates, but then we capture content as well. So our in-house videographer, Billy, will come with us. He'll film, do interviews, and then we'll use that to update the existing cask community and onboard new interested people who want to own casks in Japan. So a little bit of market research. That's where the drinking comes in. A lot of brand building as well.
Yeah. How often do you guys get out there?
Annually, at least once, usually around now, the kind of blossom season, March, April. Sometimes twice. I'll be back in October when Ontake are planning their launch of all the amenities they have. But yeah, at least once a year for a kind of 2-3 week whiskey odyssey. And then I come back a very tired man. And the kids climbing all over me and wanting more.
Daddy, why do you smell like that? So one of the things that I've found has given our tequila investors quite a lot of comfort is that I make a journey out to Jalisco once a year and, put my hand on the casks, and here's me with the selfie with the with the casks, because the biggest concern a lot of folks have with any of these programs, because there have been so many bad actors revealed, is that there's a lot of fraud, and that takes two main sort of vectors, right? One is people will sell one cask to many people, and then the first one who redeems it wins and everyone else loses, or there are no casks, it's all been a charade, and like people just disappear with the money.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we do with our whiskey to help ensure that's not going to happen to us?
I think we need to get you out there and put your hand on that cask and take a selfie and pull a sample. That is a huge part of it. We know that these casks are on site. We know the team who are there taking care of them. And one of the benefits that we offer to our cask owners is, that exclusive access to the distillery. So, these aren't open to the public at all. If you're not a cask owner, you're not stepping foot inside these distilleries for the most part. Which is obviously a nice perk as well. It's you're part of an exclusive community. It's something different. And going physically and meeting the team, drawing a sample from your cask, taking a photo. We'll get photos of the casks when they're filled. In Ontake, for example, you actually get a personalized painted cask head. So, you might have, I don't know who gets to make the decision, but Wyatt.
Go right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
But just because this is all like when you visit, of course, and then you get to touch it and everything. But one of the important things of the purchase process to highlight is, sorry, I stepped on your toes.
No, you're all good.
Is that the ownership comes directly from the distillery. So often it's a digital and physical certificate. In the case of Ontake, it's a welcome pack with an engraved plaque and a photo book and a sample of the distillate that went into your cask and everything else. But what you get is you get a digital and physical certificate signed by generally the owner and the master distiller from the distillery itself. That's reflected on the warehouse ledger in Japan. And these distilleries are the distilleries' warehouses. You don't get ownership documentation from a third party like Dekantā. And that's really important. Now, we plan to be here, of course, in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years time, maybe in a bigger office, but still here. But what's really important as a principle is that none of our cask owners, we've got cask owners in 39 countries around the world now, have any counterparty risk related to their ownership with Dekantā. So if we close the doors tomorrow, the warehouse and the distillery know who owns that cask, and they've got a documentation from them, not from us.
So the next question from that is, what happens if they were to shut their doors? How do we go fetch our whiskey? How do we deal with that?
Yeah, so logistically complicated, but quite an interesting scenario to think about. First of all 4 distilleries are very well funded early in their journey. A distillery like Karizawa deciding not to bottle anything for 10 years isn't made without a lack of cash flow behind them. The other distilleries are all now bottling and releasing whiskey. So not something we foresee nor wish. If it were to happen, there would be complexity in terms of continuing storage and insurance. What's happened in the past usually is casks are either stayed on site where they continue their maturation, and a deal is made with the administrators or with the warehouse owners, whatever it may be, or they're moved to another warehouse within Japan, where they can continue their journey. They won't disappear. They won't be forgotten about. Interestingly, what happens, and again, to emphasize, we wouldn't wish this on any distillery, but when a distillery shuts its doors, there's a finite amount of casks remaining. This is what we were talking about earlier with Karizawa and Ronan Port Ellen. Typically, they become kind of collectibles, tradables, at the very least, very unique, unusual, limited items in the world of whiskey. So it would be inconvenient, but potentially only make the casks more special. But it won't happen, and we hope it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's painful, right? But I think pretending it's never going to happen isn't really a plan, and it sounds like there's precedent for it. So I think as long as there's if this happens, then that it's absolutely fine. You know, it's whiskey in Japan. It's not a risk-free investment. Otherwise, it'd be 3%. I think it's good to highlight the fact that it's been accounted for, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the casks will always be there. The ownership will always be clear. And again, these distilleries are all relatively early in their journey, so they're in no risk of shutting down anytime soon.
Okay, so we've got a fairly well, I think, blended portfolio that we're sharing with folks. What are some of the assumptions that go into the returns we're thinking about with that? Because they're fairly aggressive returns across a lot of those guys. So my first question is, why are the returns so high? Like, why hasn't the price been arbitraged away a little bit? But what are the assumptions that go into it, and what are sort of the bull and bear cases for these that could drive those up or potentially down?
Yeah, good question. So the prices set at the point of entry are wholesale prices. So when you're buying a cask of whiskey, you're buying 200 plus liters. In the case of Ontake, 470 liters. So even if it wasn't a maturing product, you'd expect some sort of economy of scale. So you get a wholesale price, but then you also mature it under your ownership. So there's a kind of time cost here where you wait 3 years at least, 10 years with Karizawa. So the price points that we have are based on showing value to our clients. With Ontake, we have $74.50 on entry per bottle. And then it retails for between $300-400 at age 3. Similarly with Kyokawa, $63, $54 on entry, retailing now on our website for $320 at age 3, 3.5. So yeah, I just think there's value right now. I mean, with Kyokawa, you could argue that they're undervalued because it's still ground floor, it's still the first release, and there are discussions about the price of those casks going up. With Ontake, I mean, Ontake are eager to have a price which continues to build their cask community worldwide as well. So I just think there's built-in value in these casks. I own an Ontake myself. The value is a big part of my decision, as well as the whiskey. Kyokawa is next on my wish list. So yeah, we certainly see the value in them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So going to Ontake, I forget the numbers you use, but the delta from a new bottle to 3 years is about 5x, 4 to 5x, right?
Mhm.
Like, why isn't everyone in the world just buying those new bottles and waiting 3 years? Why are we so lucky?
Well, they only fill 330 casks per year. We're their exclusive partners. We only had 40 last year, 20 of the year before in December. They all sold out. So it's selling out. The demand is super high. You know, while they're expensive purchases, you know, for an individual to spend $50,000 on anything, means that our challenge from a sales perspective is not finding people who want it. Normally there's 99 out of 100 people who want it, but finding people who both want it and can afford it. So I would say the only reason they're not sold out within the first week of the year is simply because not everybody has $50,000 to spend on a cask. Of course, when you wrap it up in an SPV, you break that into fractions. It's a bit easier to participate.
Yep.
But I would say the only price point is, or the only barrier is the initial outlay, because anyone who we speak to understands the value, digs the distillery, and then occasionally you find a golfer or two who wants that as well.
Sure. One dram per hole and see how far you get.
There's a 19th hole as well at the end. Don't forget.
So so